Yeah, I think to answer the question of what responsible renewable energy means, it's like we almost need to think first about what is the point of energy. And fundamentally, it's to enable human lives, human activities, but to do that in a way that's within our planetary boundaries. And I think that then helps us think about what responsible renewable energy is. It is energy that provides equitable distribution, but it is done and generated in a way that doesn't destroy our planet. And it's also done in a way that integrates with the communities that are hosting those plants as well. So that's kind of fundamentally, I think it's those key dimensions. Yeah, I'm really excited about the future of renewable energy, partly so that we improve the conditions for our planet, we reduce the risk for climate change, but also because actually it gives us the opportunity to reimagine our energy systems and to think about those designs and those business models that mean that it's fairer, so energy is more accessible to all, that consumption levels are more equitably distributed so that you don't have countries over-consuming and countries that frankly need to consume more. But also it means that we can think about how are the co-benefits shared, how do communities benefit from those energy production plants, and how do we do that in a way that has this long-term vision about what our long-term needs are, both for human activity, but also for our planet. Yeah, the kinds of co-benefits that are pretty exciting to start looking at when we're thinking about the kind of energy systems that we need to design now in a responsible energy system is thinking about whether it supports other dimensions like livelihoods, whether it supports food security, if there's ways of co-developing food production landscapes and energy production landscapes, thinking about whether any communities that are currently marginalised can be brought up in a more equitable way through those business models. So it's not just thinking about energy production, it's what else does energy production enable, and that might be agriculture, it might be other livelihoods, it might be different ways of protecting the landscape as well. And there's examples around the world where landscapes have been protected in and around energy production plants as a way of kind of protecting the biodiversity in those spaces. And then one of the dimensions of co-benefits is thinking about co-ownership models. And I think this is really, really interesting to look at. So rather than this kind of single point of power, single point of revenues and finances model, how can those be better distributed, better shared? So a great example is in Spain, there's some examples where there's wind power being used, but actually the community themselves get cheaper or some proportion of free energy. And that means that they're hosting that, they get the disbenefits of large plants and so on across their landscape, but actually then they're also getting a benefit from it and they're built into those co-ownership models. And this feels like a real kind of fundamental, almost like a governance principle behind energy models that we need to be thinking about is who owns the land, who benefits from it, and how is that shared? Yeah, there's some really exciting examples. So one in Colombia, where it's working with indigenous populations, and it's looking at how energy production landscapes can also support other kind of development aspects. So for example, access to clean water, access to schooling, access to livelihood projects. And so profits from those projects are invested in those dimensions. So that brings up the lifestyle standard and development needs of those communities, helps to create more equity in the community, but also is energy production in and of itself. And that's a solar example. There's another really nice example in South Africa, which is where reserves have been created in and around where the energy is being produced. Again, a nice example of where biodiversity is being protected. So that kind of benefit where we're protecting other dimensions as kind of planetary boundaries upon which those local populations are also relying. It's really important. Yeah, I work at Forum for the Future, so I love thinking about the future and what are the futures we want to design, not just the futures that might happen to us. So I think it's quite exciting to think about what are the positive things we want to orient towards. So thinking about 2050 sort of energy concept, what that looks like, what I imagine is one where consumption of energy is much more equitably spread across the planet and across populations within countries, that we're not consuming beyond our planetary boundaries, so we are more efficient in our energy usage, and that our energy that is produced is having much less impact on the planet itself. But also thinking, again, going back to that original principle of why do we produce energy in the first place? What does it enable in our lives and in our activities? Is that it is enabling those kinds of things that create positive and lives that are full of well-being. So it supports other livelihoods, engages the people who are hosting the power generation systems on their lands, and it kind of enables some of those co-benefits, for example, agriculture at the same time as energy production. So I think there's almost this way of thinking about a 2050 energy system where we're thinking about one that has sort of this complex systemic design. We're efficient in our land use. We're not competing between energy and agriculture. We're seeing these as potentially united systems. So yeah, lots to kind of orient towards and positive goals to orient towards in the future. REI can provide a lot of inspiration for others because we know that the energy transition is underway. It's been called unstoppable. We know that in spite of some of the geopolitical forces. But what REI does is it provides examples. It brings it to life. It stops it just being conceptual. And also it's very systemic in its design because it brings together different energy stakeholders. And that kind of systemic set of principles is really important if we're going to design better, more efficient, cleaner energy systems, fairer energy systems. So I think it gives examples and it goes through to pilots on the ground. That might be in circularity, that might be in the sort of agri-photovoltaic space, but it gives these tangible examples that then gives other people inspiration to be able to scale that and replicate that. And it helps us imagine what a different energy system might look like.